Hey everybody, hope you have had a great week. This week's video is going to be almost a continuation of last week's, really just because I had planned on doing this video. But when I had read the information about some of the drama and other problematic things that were going on at Deck 9, I felt I needed to cover that first before I talk about the future of the Life is Strange series. So what we're going to be going over today is exactly what I said. What is next for the Life is Strange series? What can we expect? What sort of sequel or spin-off will we be seeing? Now, there's not a lot of information that's out there right now that explicitly says, this is our plan, this is our timeline with the games. They don't have like a Marvel timeline of first we're doing this installment and then we're doing this spin-off. This is all very much conjecture and theories and sort of just me spitballing here based on what I know. But, like I said last week, to really dive into the future, we also have to look at the past. And most recently, Life is Strange Double Exposure, its sales, and its critical and fan reception. I also felt that covering the future of the series was important because I'm recording this on the 10-year anniversary of Life is Strange. So it felt like, you know, with this sort of celebration of how long the series has been going on, this is the perfect time to look at what could be next. Life is Strange Double Exposure is a game that I know in my personal review I said I really enjoyed and I praised a lot. Looking back, I would say I'd give the game a solid like 8 out of 10, you know, maybe an 8.5. I overall really enjoyed it and I thought that the performances are what really carried it, and It's no shock that I'm a big fan of Hannah Telle as well as the other actors in Life is Strange, but particularly her because I love her music. So maybe I'm a little biased there, but I'm a big fan of hers. Double Exposure had all around mixed reviews. You had sources like IGN praising it as a 9 out of 10, saying with its excellent writing, exceptional characters, and fun-to-use new powers, Life is Strange Double Exposure is a worthy sequel to the 2015 original. But then you have other outlets such as GameSpot calling the game a 6 out of 10, listing the good attributes as motion capture, lighting, and overall visuals looking great, great voice acting, and a few memorable characters. Dimension hopping is an interesting, albeit underused, mechanic. And then their bad side of things is that the story and writing quality is inconsistent, it lacks tension and depth, that the story shares far too much overlap with the original Life is Strange. Max and her friendships feel extremely flat, among a few other things, but those are their top 3 issues with it. I will say, to inject my own opinion, I really don't see how... I understand how the stories overlap because obviously there is some sort of storm at the end and somebody dies and Max tries to figure out what it is, but the presentation is a lot different. It's more of a whodunit sort of mystery, and I think the way that you progress throughout it using the dimension hopping is very, very fascinating and something that I really love about the game and its mechanic. And then finally, we also have GameRant giving it a 2.5 out of 5 stars, with their pros and cons list being great atmosphere and visuals, strong soundtrack, good voice acting, good LGBTQ+ representation, but their cons being cringeworthy dialogue, nonsensical story, shallow gameplay, minor visual bugs. And I feel like if you've been around Life is Strange for a long time, you would know that cringeworthy dialogue and a somewhat nonsensical story, that's kind of our bread and butter. I'm not saying the first game is Shakespeare by any means. I think it's well written, but I think that there are certainly some issues with it that you can see in one of my previous videos about Life is Strange, some of the inconsistencies in it. But with the exception of these sort of more mixed critical reviews, most outlets viewed it the same as IGN, praising the game heavily. You can see that in a lot of the promotional material for the game after its initial release includes all of these rave reviews about how great it is, which I agree, I think it's a very good game, but fans felt somewhat differently about it. Currently, the Steam reviews, all time and recent, are mixed. And I feel that a lot of the criticism from fans especially is very, very valid. They point to a lot of the same issues that GameSpot did, pointing at the writing quality and the sort of recycling of the original story. They also felt that Max didn't really act like herself, and so people had an issue with that because they felt that, well, why couldn't have this just been an original story with a new character? Other people felt that it didn't respect the original game enough, and I will say in some aspects I can agree with this. It doesn't feel like there is much of a difference between choosing, oh, I sacrificed Arcadia Bay, and oh, I sacrificed Chloe, because yeah, her and Chloe do break up. Now I feel that that is a realistic choice, and I'm not arguing about that. I'm saying that the fact that on her phone the only people she keeps in touch with is like Victoria Chase, and really that's about it, not even Kate Marsh. You would think that in both timelines, where we've discussed in previous videos that Kate could be alive in both the Storm timeline as well as when Max goes back in time to sort of sacrifice Chloe, that she could be alive in both endings. So that sort of lack of attention to detail kind of left it lacking, that there wasn't really any sort of big alterations to the story. However, I do feel that some people take this to the next level, and that some of the hate towards this game comes from people who are sort of upset that it didn't match their fan fiction, that, oh, it's not exactly like the comics, and Chloe isn't there, and all this stuff isn't exactly how I wanted. I'm saying that is a small minority of people who are over-hating a game because it wasn't exactly what they wanted. That's a very small group. I feel most people do have very, very valid criticism of the game. But overall, sort of a mixed fan reception. But really, at the end of the day, a game can have amazing reviews or terrible reviews. But what matters to the publisher is how well it sells. According to this list here, which I'll have it linked in the description, of games that came out this past year, Life is Strange Double Exposure sort of scraped the bottom of the best sellers list. And that's not really a bad thing. I know I'm one of the people who bought the game pretty much on release. It's not a financial failure. However, I don't think that it hit the marks that Square Enix wanted it to. For reference, Life is Strange True Colors had a very, very similar level of financial success. And similarly, True Colors had a lot of critical acclaim, as well as some mixed feelings from the fans. But the reason I would call this a disappointment to Square Enix is that they were pulling out all the stops for this. They were having Hannah Telle return as Max, and it was finally going to pick up with her story, something that people have been waiting for years, about 10 years at this point. So for it to sell about as well as their previous game that included very minimal characters from previous games and was sort of just a spin-off, you can see how financially that would disappoint them. They thought that this was going to be the best-selling game of the series and it was going to do all these numbers, when really it just did pretty well for a AAA game. So it's safe to say that because it made money and because it had varying critical success, that there will be a sequel. They are not abandoning the Life is Strange franchise in the slightest. In fact, I have a Games Radar article, which I'll also have linked below, relating to the future of the series, but we're just going to look at one quote from it. No matter what anyone thinks about certain creative calls that were made for Double Exposure, I think it's important that people understand that they are all made with intent. We thought long and hard about every one of them, and have done our best to basically plant seeds. The ending is just a way to say that we have a future plan. There's not a whole lot more I can say about that. This is heading somewhere, should folks want more after Double Exposure. So all that to say, they're not done with the series. But like I said, what warrants a sequel is really the financial side of things, and it was successful. But it makes me wonder if Square and Deck Nine plan on taking the series in a different direction because of some of the mixed reception as well as the okay financial response. Here are a few ways and different sort of storylines that I feel they could follow up on when they continue the series. And these are all based on the sort of reaction that the publisher, Square Enix and Deck Nine, could have to the fan reception as well as the critical reception of Life is Strange Double Exposure. So, obviously, first, they could continue the path that they're on. They could do a very direct sequel to Double Exposure, follow up with Max, follow up with Safi, and sort of just come back to Caledon University at a different time of the year. And I know with the sort of teasing of Safi wanting to find other people out there who have special powers, we could see the return of other Life is Strange characters, such as Alex, such as Daniel, depending on the ending. That's an opportunity for them to bring back some other characters. Now, another way they could do this is they could sort of have it be an ensemble type thing. You could pick up with Max as well as Alex, and all of their stories end up tying together through Safi. Another idea I had is that Max basically goes on a road trip to find Safi, or to try and reach out to her to basically say, I'm sorry, but this isn't the right way. Basically just a way to get Max out of Caledon and also get her into the world where, once again, she could run into various other Life is Strange characters or people with abilities. Another very drastic response to some of the mixed reception of the game is that they drop the Safi plot altogether. They could easily write her out of the game, just have her not come back for a while. We pick up with Max and we put her into a new situation. Whether it's something else that happens at Caledon University or Max leaving for the summer, maybe. I think what they would really do, though, is if we're going to write Safi out, if they realize that, oh, fans don't really like her all that much, they could very easily see this as an opportunity to sort of go back to basics. Have Chloe reach out in some way, or come up with somehow, some way that Max's powers end up putting her in a timeline where all these characters from the first game are around. Maybe she gets sent all the way back in time as an adult to Blackwell. I'm just spitballing here. I'm not saying if I like these ideas or not. However, I feel that if they really wanted to go back to basics and if they feel that they need to sort of course correct from this Safi stuff, finding other people with powers, that the best way to do that in their view and also make a lot of money is sort of do a Return to Arcadia Bay style thing. In fact, they could probably just straight up adapt the comics. My next two ideas are pretty similar and have a lot of overlap. One of the things that we've seen with the Life is Strange series is the sort of pattern of release. We get one mainline one, then we get a spin-off. Then we get a mainline one, then we get a spin-off. So, for example, if you want to view, for example, Life is Strange 1, we had Before the Storm. Life is Strange 2, then we had True Colors. If you view True Colors as sort of a spin-off, because it's not labeled as Life is Strange 3, however, the budget and the size of the game feels like it should be just Life is Strange 3. However, I think the reason that they didn't just label it as that is, number one, they didn't want to drive away people who weren't familiar with the series, and number two, Life is Strange 2 having sort of a mixed reception. Not that it's not a brilliant game, but people had sort of adverse reactions to it because of how different it was from the first game. They wanted to sort of separate themselves from that. And then following that, you have Double Exposure, which I would consider a mainline game, especially because it includes the return of Max Caulfield. So all that to say, if we follow that pattern, that means we should be expecting a spin-off of some kind. So we could possibly see a sequel to another Life is Strange. Perhaps a Life is Strange True Colors Part 2, maybe with just a different subtitle, or even a direct sequel to Life is Strange 2. Or another prequel. We could go further back into either Chloe's life. We could see more of Chloe's life and her relationship with Rachel leading directly to Life is Strange 1. We could also get a fully fledged game based on a character such as Steph, who got her own DLC that was fairly well received. Or the final option is that it's going to be another anthology story that's completely disconnected from any of the other games. And I mean through like direct protagonist. We could see a whole new character in a whole new part of the country with a whole new set of powers. And absolutely, it's going to be within the same universe, just like all of the games are. Really, the only difference I could see is if they wanted to keep the Safi storyline going, they could have her show up or have a character from Double Exposure show up at the very end. Or if they wanted to sort of keep it disconnected and kind of just plant the seeds, they don't need to have a direct reference to it. But like every Life is Strange game, there's always something tying them together. So all that to say, once again, we don't have much concrete evidence to go on. We can only speculate. But I feel I've done a good job at speculating based on the reviews that Double Exposure got, as well as its financial success. what would you like to see in a Life is Strange game? What would you like to see in a sequel? Any of my theories, or do you have one of your own? Please comment below. Let me know. I also have a Twitter that's in my bio. Feel free to reach out. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and have a good morning or evening or whatever.